So my name is Lynette Liu. I am in the marketing and product management group at Outright, and we've been experimenting with these Getting Started with Outright webinars. This is the second we're having. I'm really glad that you guys can attend. It is very much targeted towards people that have recently signed up for Outright and have not necessarily started actively using it, or at least using it on a regular basis, and where you may have some questions about how do you get started, what are some of the best practices, and where can you get help if you get stuck in any area. Okay, so here I am. I am logged into an Outright account right now, and you'll see some data here in the form of these green and orange bars. If you do not have any of your data in here, you won't see anything in this area, but I've specifically logged into an account that has some transaction data in it so that the demo will be more meaningful as we go through it. So first of all, I'd like to understand a little more about you guys. I'm going to send out a poll question. So how long have you been running your own business? And I'll give you guys a couple seconds to answer that. Okay, all right. Most people have voted, so I'm going to close the poll and then share the results. So very interesting. There's actually, it looks like most people have been running their business for more than 2 years. That's great. And then there's also a group of people that are very new, the less than 3 months group. So very interesting. And then I have a second question that I'd like to ask. And I apologize if you can hear any background information. The office I'm in has thin walls, so there's a meeting going on right next door to me, so you may hear some laughing and so forth. Okay, so the second poll question, how do you currently keep track of your business finances? And I'll give a couple seconds for people to respond. Okay, going once, going twice. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. All right, so it looks like most people, or about approximately half of you keep track of your finances through some kind of software like QuickBooks. It could be something else. I didn't specifically ask that in the poll. There's a fair amount of you who use spreadsheets, the ever popular box of receipts, and then yikes, I don't keep track or don't know. So I'm really glad to hear that most people do use some kind of software or spreadsheet to keep track of it. And I'll show you, and so for those who do already use some kind of software, I think it'll be interesting for you as we go through this demo to see what is it that Outright tracks and how does that compare to your current solution, and then just make that decision for yourself to see whether it makes sense to use Outright or not. And then definitely for people who use spreadsheet, box of receipts, or yikes, I don't keep track or don't know, I think for that audience, Outright definitely has a benefit. And depending on the complexity of your business, this demo will help you decide whether Outright will fit your needs just fine, or whether there is something a little more sophisticated that will meet your needs better. And I say that because if you, for example, have employees or you're in incorporated business, you might want something a little more sophisticated like QuickBooks. But for a lot of sole proprietors who don't have employees, who are filing their taxes as part of their personal income taxes via the Schedule C, Outright is perfectly targeted for that audience. All right, so thank you for responding to those two questions. And then let's move on to the demo. Okay, so here I am logged into an Outright account. If you're brand new, as I mentioned, you won't have any numbers here or bars. And let's quickly go through what Outright has in here. So on the main page is the dashboard. It provides a quick overview or a snapshot of how your business is doing. So this particular chart, front and center, happens to be my profit and loss for the current year, which is 2013. If I hover over any of these bars, you can see that I'll actually see the value behind it. So I've hovered over the income. I'm hovering over expenses right now for February. And then if I want to see any of the detail behind what makes up those numbers, I can click on that bar and it'll take me to my list of expenses, in this case, in February 2013, that make up the $31,479,000 and change. Also, what I'll see on the top left is what's new for me this week. So it'll tell me I've had 7 new sales. It tells me whether or not I have uncategorized expenses. It tells me the current balances of accounts I've linked to my Outright account. And let me scroll down a little. It'll give me a snapshot of, for the 2 accounts that I have linked here, credit card and Etsy, that what outstanding balances I might have. And then some more information which you can peruse through yourself. So this is a quick overview of what's going on with my business. Let's quickly go over to the linked accounts tab, and this is going to show you what business accounts I actually have linked to this particular Outright account, which have the transactions that made up all the numbers we just looked at on the overview tab. So in this particular account, I have my Etsy account linked, I have a Wells Fargo checking account linked, I have a PayPal account linked, and I have a Chase credit card linked. And so what you should ask yourself here is, for your business, which accounts do you use to take payments? For example, is it PayPal? Is it your bank account? Is it some kind of, is it some credit card processing service? And then on the expense side, what do you use to pay for your expenses related to your business? Credit cards, PayPal, etc. And so you want to list out those accounts that make up your income and expenses and link them to Outright. Because the benefit that gives you is now Outright can go and pull all the transactions related to those accounts on a nightly basis, or more often if you want it to. And so you no longer have to log into PayPal to see what's going on there, and then log into your credit card account to see what's going on there. You have a consolidated view of all your transactions in one place, i.e. Outright. And so in this case, if I thought, okay, well, I'm also an eBay seller, I can go in and I can add an account. So there's over 4,000 financial institutions and e-commerce accounts that Outright can connect to. So you'll see, of course, the major e-commerce accounts here, and then the common bank or credit accounts here. But if yours isn't one of these in the list, you can search for yours. And so in this case, I'll show you what it would look like if I were connecting an eBay account. So it would actually ask me, take me to an eBay login screen. So you'll see here I'm actually on an ebay.com account. I'm going to enter my username and password, and then it'll authenticate my username and password for eBay, and then start to import the account or start to import the transactions coming into Outright. And then that way, again, the benefit is that everything will be stored in Outright from all the various accounts you use via a consolidated view, so you no longer have to individually log into eBay, individually log into PayPal, individually log into banking or check or credit card, that kind of thing. Okay, so I won't go through this because I don't have any transactions in my eBay seller account. That would make it interesting. But I think for you guys, definitely start by going to the linked accounts, adding an account, or if there's, you can also add transactions manually if you don't have that many transactions coming through a particular payment method or expense method, and you just want to go in and type them in. So both ways are possible, but if you have a lot of transactions, I definitely recommend adding that account to Outright so they can be imported on a nightly basis. Okay, and then one thing I want to point out is, let me go to this help article we have here. So how much historical information can Outright actually pull from each type of account? And you'll see, for example, eBay, we can pull 90 days of historical information and then, et cetera, and you can scroll down this whole list to get the detailed information. And the importance of showing you this is because when it comes to tax time, you will actually need the whole year's worth for 2013 of transactions in order to, file your taxes. So this being already the middle of July, if you have eBay transactions and you connect them, you connect your account today, there's only going to be 90 days worth of historical data. And then similarly for Etsy, there's only going to be 90 days of historical data, and these historical limitations are based on just information that these institutions provide to us. But to make up the difference between, okay, so 3 months earlier than July is mid-April. So to get the information between January 1st and mid-April, there are ways to upload those transactions into Outright via an Excel or a CSV file. But once the transactions are in Outright, they will be forever in Outright. And so let's say if you keep those accounts linked to Outright, come middle of July 2014, you will have all your 2013 transactions plus everything from January 1st, 2014 to middle of July 2014. Does that make sense? And let me quickly go over to the questions area to see if anyone has questions. Okay. Oh, okay. So one of the questions, and I should have looked at this earlier, from Jiffy is, I have signed up for Outright through, it sounds like you signed up for Outright through eBay. How do I access it from eBay? And so let me see if I can quickly see that, because I know there are several eBay users out there. And it's essentially the same interface that I am showing here, but you need to sign into your eBay account and then access Outright through there if you did sign up through eBay. So once you're signed in, where is it? So if you go here to your name and then account settings, under the applications tab, you will see, so I have signed up for Outright through eBay, and then you'll see Outright's right here, and then you can click start. So if you sign up for Outright through eBay, that's how you get into Outright. Okay, let me go back to the other questions to see if there's anything I should answer now. Okay, so I think we're good on that. Okay, and then the other thing is if you specifically signed up through eBay, you'll automatically have your eBay account created. You don't have to do add an account. And similarly, we just launched a sign up through PayPal. So if you're logged in through your PayPal account and you've created an account to Outright through PayPal, then you would log into PayPal as usual and launch Outright through PayPal. So then automatically you would have your PayPal account here. Okay. Okay, so you can see I have these accounts connected to this Outright account. Now let's go into each of these tabs and see what we see has been pulled over from these accounts. So I'm looking at the income tab for the time period of January 1st through December of this year. And I'll see in reverse chronological order all the transactions that have either been automatically imported from these accounts, or they're ones that I can add manually, which, as I mentioned before, is an option. And so in this case, most of them have been automatically imported. I believe all of these that have this format in the description, payment, refund, those are all from PayPal. And what's interesting about this is that Outright either automatically categorizes them based on information it receives from PayPal or your credit card or your bank account, or if something happens to be uncategorized, and let me see if I can find anything right now. Okay, I don't see anything on the first page. Let's see if I can just, I don't think there's anything uncategorized right now because this account, the user has gone in and been pretty good about taking care of those, let's say on a weekly or monthly basis. But if there's something that's either uncategorized or doesn't look correct, and let me just select this first one as an example, I can go ahead and say, well, it's not really a sales transaction, it's actually an income adjustment for PayPal, or it's an other income. And I can recategorize it. Or I can say, okay, well, I use my PayPal account to get payment from my neighbor for something I did for them, so it's nothing to do with my business. I can make that a personal income item, and in that way, it'll be excluded from all the reports related to your business. Okay, and then if I do change this, and I'm not going to change it for sure, but so I changed it from sales 2 to sales 1 in this example. Outright asks me, do I want to categorize all transactions from Melinda Earp in the future as sales? And if I say yes by checkboxing it and save, that teaches Outright that for this particular transaction and all existing and future ones, go ahead and categorize them as sales. So that way, over time, I should have less and less uncategorized ones, or less and less ones that I feel are incorrectly categorized related to known vendors. And the other interesting thing you'll see here is I have the ability to split this transaction. And this is interesting if, let's have an example of you went to your bank and you deposited 3 checks for payments from 3 different customers. The bank's going to report that as one transaction, which is consisting of the sum of those 3 checks. But what I want to do is really record those 3 as individual sales transactions from different customers, so then I can split those transactions. And so instead of the whole thing, in this case, coming from Melinda Earp, this one can be from, I don't know, C.H. Lawrence, and I can put a description, I can change a category, and I can split the 1390 across 2 transactions. And then you can add split if there's more, if there's more that you want to split it into. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of that because I don't want to change those right now. And then what's interesting about these categories is that these are categories that can be specifically mapped to line items in your Form 1040 Schedule C, so that when tax time comes, you know exactly what business income you have as mapped to the Schedule C, and then what expenses you have as mapped to the Schedule C, so that you're ready for taxes with very little or no work. And then we'll go into that in more detail when I show the Schedule C report. So for now, before moving on to another tab, let me quickly go over to the questions to see if there is anything related to income. Okay, so Audrey says also through Etsy, and I'm afraid I didn't, you probably typed this question earlier, so I don't know the context of this question, also through Etsy, so I'm just going to guess that the question is, will you also see transactions through Etsy, and what will they find? So let me, maybe to answer this question, I'm going to just choose here in this drop-down box, Etsy bill activity, and then do a filter. And these should be, okay, in this case, it was from Etsy bill activity, so there's going to be no income transactions. But when we move to expense, you'll see probably several transactions related to Etsy, if this was an active Etsy account related to, actually, I take that back. If this were an active Etsy account and I chose this filter, I would see all my transactions that came through Etsy here. And then, of course, if you're accepting PayPal payments through Etsy, those would show up under the PayPal filter. Okay, and there's another question here. Is eBay able to see our accounts, and which ones are combined? And that's from Carrie. So I think the question is, if you are logged in through, if you created your outright account through eBay, are you able to see your accounts, and are they combined? Not really sure what that means. So for eBay, you're going to see all your income that came in through eBay, probably through PayPal, so all these payments like this. And if you have multiple PayPal accounts or multiple eBay accounts, you can connect each one to Outright and then be able to see all of them through Outright. Okay. Oh, okay. So Audrey says, can you access Outright through Etsy? And similar to what I showed, you can access Outright through eBay. And the answer is no. So we don't have a sign-up flow through Etsy like we do for eBay. What you would do is you would go to outright.com, which is where you probably started to sign up for your Outright account, and then click on this login link right here. And that's how you would access your Outright account. Okay, and then, okay, and so Natalie asks, can I use split transactions to split my Etsy sales from the shipping fee charged that is added into my sales? Yes. So if Outright doesn't already get that automatically, and for some e-commerce providers, we do get that. Like I'm not sure about Etsy, but definitely for PayPal, we get transactions that are listed as shipping income versus sales, and that's already automatically broken out and categorized. But if for your particular source, it comes in as one transaction, then that's exactly what the split functionality is for. You would come in here, you would split it, and then you can indicate, so maybe it's the same name here, but you can put in that this is the shipping income and then recategorize this to shipping income. Okay. Okay, there's a question about duplicate transactions, and this is kind of a complicated topic, and I'm not sure of the exact details behind this, Gabriella, so I will reach out to you separately to find out what your specific situation is and try to answer this offline. All right, so for this moment, though, I will move on to the Expenses tab, which has a little more variety behind it. And so again, here in the Expenses tab, I see everything for this calendar year. And again, I can, if I want to, I can just filter to look for the PayPal ones or the credit card ones and so forth, or look at everything as I'm doing now. And so here, I will see that most of the expenses that have been imported into Outright have been automatically categorized. And for ones, and again, I can go ahead and say, well, this trip to In-N-Out Burger, that was really personal. That wasn't related to anything to do with my business. So this particular expense is a non-business expense, and I'm going to make that personal. And then I can click to do it for all expenses for In-N-Out Burger, or I can just do it for this particular one and then save, and then I'll make that change. So I won't do that here. Or if this is this particular transaction that's it's something where I want to capture the receipt, you can see there's this attach functionality. And this is particularly interesting with the Outright iPhone app. If I've done an expense and I can take a picture of my receipt and then attach it to the transaction and then have that saved in Outright. So when I need it, it's right there with the transaction. And then you can also split expense transactions, very similar to how you do income transactions. So let me cancel again. Oh, and then what's interesting about all these categories is that the ones that are created are there for you to use when you first create your Outright account, are all linked to tax, to expense line items in the Schedule C, and that's to make taxes easy. But for example, but you can also anytime create transactions of your own if there's something that you particularly are interested in. And see, in this case, in this account, there's some silly ones, but just for the purpose of showing you fun stuff for work, happiness, Kirby Freeman, etc., etc. Those are all expense categories that have been created specifically within this Outright account, so that if I want to see, oh, how much have I spent on anything that's for Kirby Freeman, then I can just, so let me cancel out of this. I can then just choose Kirby Freeman and filter for those. And in this case, there were no transactions that are categorized as that, but that might be an example why you want to use a customized expense category. The other thing is there's specifically an uncategorized tab here, and some of these, or most of these, are probably ones that were automatically imported, and for whatever reason, the information provided by the transaction source is ambiguous. For example, something to do with Chevron gas station could either be something related to car and truck expense, or it could be something completely different. And so in cases where it's ambiguous, Outright is just going to leave it uncategorized. which is a flag for you to say, okay, let me go in and categorize that myself. And so in this case, the best practice is if you have a lot of transactions, log into Outright about once a week and just look at what's been uncategorized and then make sure to assign a category to them, whether that's personal or a business expense category. If you don't have a ton of transactions, probably going into Outright once a month is good enough to do that housekeeping. And the whole purpose of this is that come tax time, your transactions are ready to go. So for anything that's uncategorized, I can now select something like it's their Shoreline Aquatic Center, so maybe that's car and truck, and then I can just save that one, and then it'll be saved. And then any future transactions coming in from Shoreline Aquatic Center will be categorized as car and truck, if I wish it to be. And then the other interesting thing in the expenses tab is mileage. So if you choose to deduct your mileage expense based on the number of miles driven, this is where you would go to enter it. So I can add mileage. I can say I've driven 100 miles on a business-related trip. And then I can save it. And what will happen is Outright will take this IRS multiplier of 56.5 cents per mile and then add that into my list of expenses. And what's particularly useful about this is, again, if you have the Outright iPhone app, you can do this on the go as you're driving so you don't forget to do it. Okay, and then anything that you've categorized as non-business, it appears here. So you still have a record of it, but it just isn't going, none of these transactions are incorporated into your business reports. Okay, let me quickly again go to questions. Okay, so there's a question from Karen. When you pay for merchandise you are going to sell with your PayPal account, how should that be categorized? So if you consider that to be cost of goods sold, you can do that. If it's merchandise you're going to sell with your PayPal account, how should that be categorized? So that if it's cost of goods sold, that is probably there is a category for that. So let's just look at all the categories. Whoops. If it's cost of goods sold, if it's stuff that you consider maybe more office expense, you can, office supplies, office expense, you can choose one of those. So I would talk to your accountant and ask them for those particular types of expenses, how do you want to categorize them, and then make sure to just consistently do that within Outright. But from your short description, it sounds like it's probably cost of goods sold. Okay, Natalie asked, is there an app for the expense receipts on an iPad, not only iPhone? Oh, so when I say the Outright iPhone app, it's actually an app that works on any iOS platform, so would certainly work on the iPad. It's just we don't have any additional bells and whistles that we could take advantage of with iPad capabilities, but anything that works on the iPhone should work on your iPad. And then I see there's a couple of questions related to what the right categories are to choose for certain types of purchases. And the answer is there. If you look at the Form Schedule C from the IRS, again, I think it's a conversation you have with your accountant to decide whether something is actually inventory. is it cost of goods sold? Is it the office expense? What is it? And then making sure that you consistently tag those items as those categories when they come in. But I don't think there's any perfectly definitive answer of something is definitely cost of goods sold versus inventory versus office expense. Okay, Charles asks, does the IRS require certain categories for business expenses that we need to use? And the answer is yes. So if you are a sole proprietor or an LLC that's reporting your business transactions through the Schedule C, you can what you can do is you can Google for Schedule C IRS, let's say, and then you'll find this PDF version of this year's Schedule C. And then you can see under Part 2 expenses, these are all the IRS, the commonly used expenses that the IRS expects businesses to tag their expenses or bucket their expenses into. There's also, of course, this big category of other. And these are initially the categories that outright will try to assign your expenses into. If it can't figure it out, it'll leave it as uncategorized. But I would say when you start using outright and start doing it categories, maybe just have a quick conversation. When you have enough data, have a quick conversation with your accountant to see if the categories you're using make sense for your type of business in your industry. And then once you're confident of that, then outright can continue to replicate that instead of you having to manually do it yourself. Okay. Okay, the question is, how do you enter inventory in outright? So outright is not an inventory management system. There's no way to enter the type of inventory. It's software for capturing actual income and expenses that have been incurred for your business. So we don't have an inventory tracking feature. Okay, so let me move on to reports. And here, so assuming you have your most used business accounts linked to outright, you can now access several reports which will be quite interesting. So profit loss, we saw this on the first page, and it's also here in more detail, allowing me to filter for different dates, view it by different time periods. So if I view it for the whole year, 2013, I'll see previous 2 years as well as 2013. And I can click on table to get the numbers view instead of the bar graph view. And in either case, if when I hover over the actual bar or number, I can click through to see what all the transactions were that make up that number. So we saw that the income for that time period was $9,822.02. And to see what made up that entire number, I click through, and now I can look at all the transactions that went into making up that income amount. Okay, the other interesting thing here is top customers, types of income. So types of income will show me for categories I've assigned to the transactions or have been automatically assigned to the transactions, you know, how did they break down? This is probably a little more interesting on the expense side. So your spending, I can see in this particular account, the majority of my expenses are uncategorized. I have a big chunk here for travel, and then, you know, a bunch of smaller ones right here, which again I can click into to get more information about what makes up which transactions make up those amounts. We have a sales by state. So if you're a seller who is impacted by the sales tax collection laws, what this will show you is, so assuming you've assigned states to your customers, and this isn't a good example because there's no state assigned to my customers, but this report will show you how many sales occurred in the various states, and then the amounts that were collected, and if I'm obligated to pay sales tax in those states, then the amount that I need to be remitting based on the amount I've collected. Okay, and then let me move on to taxes. So everything we've looked at up to now has been available in the free version of Outright. And in the Taxes tab, this is part of our Outright Plus offering, which is a paid version of Outright. And I'm going to go straight to the Schedule C. So you'll see here, we call it the Schedule C worksheet for Form 1040. And as I scroll down, you'll see that these map specifically to the line items that are on the actual Schedule C you file with your 1040 to the IRS. So income, and I'll flip over to, whoops, oh, I might have closed it. No. Okay, I have closed that. I've closed that form Schedule C from the IRS, but you can see in this worksheet, these are the line items that appear there, as well as all the expenses. And so if you've done your categorization and kind of made sure throughout the year as your transactions came in that the right categories were used, when it comes tax time, April 15th, 2014, you should just be able to print out this worksheet and take it to your accountant and say, okay, this is what I have spent and what I have gotten for my business. Some people actually give their accountant a login to their Outright account so the accountant can click in and see what makes up like this $4,301. And then the accountant can say, well, that's strange for your particular business. You don't seem to have any advertising, but most people in your line of work have spent at least some amount, so they can kind of look through this and make sure that what you have categorized looks good and seems in line. And then that can greatly facilitate both your preparation to do your taxes as well as their time in doing your taxes if you're using your accountant. And there's also several Outright customers who do their taxes directly just using the Schedule C worksheet, so it isn't like you have to use an accountant. And I think that's the main thing that's here that's quite interesting. The sales tax one is not going to be so interesting because, as I mentioned before, I haven't assigned any states to the customers in this particular account. Estimated taxes may be interesting. So based on the amount of the income that's coming in that has been imported into Outright or manually added, Outright will send me a reminder and tell me how much estimated taxes I should be paying at each of these 3 periods before April 15th. Okay. Oh, I did have actually another poll question I forgot to ask the audience, so let me do that now. What accounts do you use for your business? And please do choose all that apply. Okay, I'm still seeing votes come in, so I'll wait a few seconds. All right, going once, going twice. I will close the poll. and share the results. So for your businesses, most people use a bank or credit union, credit card, PayPal. There's a fair number of online sellers. I saw that through the question you answered when you first registered. And so, as I mentioned before, outright, we connect to all the major online seller accounts, eBay, Etsy, Amazon, PayPal, of course. And then for the banks and credit cards, we connect to over 4,000 financial institutions. So chances are you will find your financial institution in the list and be able to set up that automatic import. So thank you for answering that question. And then I have one more. How did you report your business income to the IRS for the last tax year? See the votes rolling in. Okay, 3 more seconds for anyone else that wants to vote. All right. So most people, 3/4 of you filed as a sole proprietor via the Schedule C. There is a sizable chunk of you, 19%, who filed as a corporation. And if you're some types of corporations, particularly I think it's the LLC, a certain type of LLC, do file your business income through a Schedule C, then outright, you know, as I showed you, maps to those directly. And then some types of organizations that are a little more complicated because you have business, you're an S Corp, you need to have a balance sheet. Outright is probably not appropriate for you because we don't do the balance sheet. And so that'll help you decide, hopefully that this information like this will help you decide whether or not outright works for you. And I would say the goal as we are adding features and as we came up with outright was very much for the business, particularly sole proprietors who filed their business numbers via a Schedule C. So that's where outright will work the best. And we started serving the market of small businesses who sold through online marketplaces like eBay, Etsy, and Amazon. We're quickly expanding that to anyone who takes transactions, let's say through PayPal, since that's become such a universal way of accepting and paying for things. And so hopefully from this demo that we've gone through today, you've gotten enough information to be able to go in and just try out outright for yourself to see if it works for your particular business. But thank you very much for answering those poll questions. I am at the end of the demo. It's gone a little longer than I had originally thought, but that's great. I'm glad to see that there's a lot of questions. And I'm going to go back to the questions right now. And if you have another one you'd like to answer, you'd like me to answer, please go ahead and type it in. And I will send a follow-up email with a link to the recording of this particular demo, as well as some useful links to where our YouTube how-to videos reside and where also our help articles reside. And on our help site, you'll be able to, if you're kind of a self-service person, you can go to YouTube or our help site to get information. Or if you want to get individual help from an actual person, you can either do that by submitting a request that will be answered, you know, via email, or in this Ask Us link here, you can also find someone to chat with during its business hours. Our support agents are located in California and Arizona, so you know, they start work a little early and then go to a little late, but it's pretty much during that time zone. Okay, so let me see if there's any additional questions. I don't see any more questions. Let me just wait a few seconds to see if anyone has any, and if not, please, thank you for your time, and please look for the links I've mentioned in the email, and I will also send out my email address. Okay, thank you, Natalie, thank you, Jiffy, and thank you, everyone else. Bye.